lost civilizations. See ancient artifacts and long-lost ancient scrolls.
The strange writing on this clay brick is known as cuneiform. Now, the script was used for
Take the journey of a lifetime and travel to ancient Babylon and the island of Patmos to discover how ancient mysteries reveal the future. A live seminar series. Don't miss any program.
The Bible says, I saw a beast rising up out of the sea. The dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth. And the Bible says he exercised all the authority of the first beast. And then the Bible says these words, and all the world marveled and followed the beast. So don't miss what John is saying. This is going to impact everybody on the planet. Sadly, most people are going to follow this beast. All the world marveled and followed the beast. Now, how do these three powers control the world? How do they do it? Well, number one, says John, they're going to use economics, economic and financial control. John said, he, the land beast, causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their forehead, and that no one may buy or sell except the one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. So you notice that? No one can buy or sell unless they do this. So financial pressure. Second one is physical coercion. John said, he, that's the land beast, was granted power to cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be what? Killed. That's physical coercion in anybody's language. Now, that's the two things that are going to use to control the world. Economics or physical coercion. What's the purpose? What's their purpose for global control? Now, this will surprise you, but John, who has many things to say about the end times and things we're going to see which are really very accurate, he says it's going to be global worship or allegiance. That may surprise us, but let's notice what John says. And all the world marveled and followed the beast, so they worshipped the dragon, who gave authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast. He, now he's talking about the land beast, he causes the earth and those who dwell in it to what? To worship the first beast. Do you notice worship, worship, worship? 3 times. In other words, the final events are going to impact on the spiritual sphere of life for every person on the planet. And what will be the final outcome of this physical, financial, global control? Notice what John says. It's going to be a global economic meltdown. Notice what he said. The merchants of the earth, that's the business people, the merchants of the earth will weep and mourn. Why? For no one buys their merchandise anymore, for in 1 hour such great riches come to nothing. It's all going to come crashing down, in other words, says John. That's the outcome. Now, you say, is this really coming? Is this stuff really going to happen, or did John just have too much to eat the night before and had a bad dream? Maybe he had too many mushrooms or something. What's happening here? Is this really true? Well, what I'm going to do with you, I want to show you things that are happening in our world today that show, hey, John was onto something, all right? Now, we cannot understand all this today because it's too much, not enough time. But that's what we're going to unpack as we go through the next few weeks, okay, together. But let's get a start on it. I have in my library at home a book called The Lexus and the Olive Tree. Lexus being a nice car, which usually you have to be a little bit more wealthy to have one of those. Currently, I don't have one, therefore. And then the olive tree, what's that? Well, in the Middle East, this is how you made your money. This is how you, from the olive tree, and you sold olives and olive oil, see? So I guess we could say a little bit the haves and the have-nots, the Lexus and the olive tree. Now, what is globalization? By the way, someone asked a very good question at lunchtime. What is archaeology? And that's a very good question, because we use that word a lot of times, didn't we? Archaeology, just quickly, is digging up the dirt and you find stuff from ancient times, okay? You see, in ancient times, in the Bible times, people used to build their houses on hills, usually. Villages on hills. Why? Because you're above the floodplain, you can get flooded out, and it's much easier to fight an enemy who's coming up the hill. If you're on top, it's a better place to be, the high ground. So they tended to build there on little hills. But those hills grew in time. Why did they grow? Well, you imagine you build your house and everybody else in your neighbourhood builds a house, and then comes a big earthquake and flattens a lot of it. What are you going to do? You're not going to bring in the bulldozer back then, because they didn't have bulldozers, right? What you do is you use existing structures that are okay for foundations to build on. And you bring in dirt to fill up the empty places and you build on top. And then say an army came through and destroyed a city, and people had to run away. When they come back, they're going to have to use some of the structures, some were burnt, and they build on top. So as time went on, those hills grew over time. So if you go to Jerusalem today and you walk on the streets in Jerusalem today, that's not what Jesus walked on. That's 6 metres down the ground, because the hill's grown by 6 metres in the last 2,000 years. My daughter, who's an archaeologist, she lives in Austria, in Vienna. She's always going to Israel to dig. And she's been to, for example, Megiddo. There are 31 levels, 31 civilizations built one on top of the other. This is not uncommon in the Middle East, all right? So when you dig down, as you dig down, it's getting older and older. So you're digging up. As you move down, the stuff's getting older and older. And so that's what archaeologists may find things. For example, if we were digging in Israel and we came across a whole lot of pig bones, guess who probably didn't live in that place? The Jews, because they don't eat pigs. So there must have been some other group. It tells a story, you understand. Anyway, that's archaeology. Sorry we got onto that one. Where were we up to? Oh, globalisation. Well, globalisation, what does he mean by this? What's he talking about? Well, what he means is the world has or is fast becoming a global economic village. And he says there's 3 reasons we've become like that today in our world. 3 driving things. Number 1, the democratization of technology. That's a big fancy word. What does he mean? He means everybody can get their hands on stuff to connect with the rest of the world today. Right? Thanks, when he means things like this, smartphones, computers, and so on. You say, you sure about that? Yes, I'm sure about that. I've been in the back box of Bougainville in Papua New Guinea on the back of a truck. We're driving for like 3 hours. They decided to stop the truck so everybody could go to the toilet in the bush, but everybody jumped off the truck, jumped on their iPhones in the middle of Papua New Guinea to connect with people, right? It doesn't matter what culture you live in, whether it's Mongolia or India or Africa or Australia, you can connect with the rest of people around the planet, right? And you can set up business. You can go and buy a second-hand laptop in one of the shops here, and you can sell, if you want to, icy poles to the people who live up there in Iceland or somewhere. You can set up business because of computers. That's what he's saying. Everybody can get hold of the technology to connect with the world. Number 2, the democratization of finances. What does he mean by this? Everybody can afford this stuff. You say, I can't afford it. Yes, you can. You can get a loan. Easy today. How do you get a loan? Well, just go to any shop and ask for what? Ask for a credit card. They'll give you 3 or 4. Got to be careful how you use them. You might get into debt, but these are little loans that people buy this stuff with. That's how people in Africa and Papua New Guinea can get their hands on this stuff. Because they're not cheap, some of this stuff at first, is it? But the price goes down. So they get this. And the last one is the democratization of information. It says, in the past there were bamboo curtains and iron curtains, the Soviets and Chinese bamboo curtains. When you not going to let people come in and out. But information travels easily today, doesn't it? You know, it just crosses the world so easily thanks to satellites and all of that sort of stuff. Information flows readily. And so he said, listen, that's how come we're like a global village today. Even though we're all over the world, but we're also connected compared to the past. In the past, how did you get your message? Someone sent a letter from India to you living in Australia and it took a few weeks to get here, right? Now it happens at the push of a button and you're done. All right, so, but he says, there are serious implications for being a global village. And two of the implications are this. Number one, there's the opportunity for global economic control. Because now we're all connected economically, someone or some group can control other people. That's possible. And that's the first thing. And if I remember reading the Bible, John said that's exactly what's going to happen one day, right? No one will be able to buy or sell, we read, unless they do what they're told to do. So no question the Bible predicted this, and we're going to see soon, is this happening? We'll come to that in a moment. The Bible put it this way, we just read, he, the land beast, causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their forehead, and that no one on the planet may buy or sell except the one who has the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Now, let's talk about this now. There are three characteristics in this prediction of John. Remember, he's writing 2,000 years ago. Number one, no one. What does that mean? That means global. No one can buy or sell right across the planet. Global. Buy or sell, that's what? Economics. Okay, that's economics. And lastly, except unless you do this. In other words, that's control. So that's why we talk about global economic control. That's what John says is coming one day. Now, for global economic control, you need two things. Number one, you need a controllable currency system. We'll talk about that in a moment. And secondly, you need a global financial system. We'll talk about that. Let's begin with a controllable currency system. Have you noticed that our country today and our world is moving to cashless? This means you can be controlled. You see, once upon a time, if you had a bunch of gold or silver or cash, what could you do with it? Hide it under your bed, dig a hole in the backyard, and someone was willing to get some of that to give you some fruit or whatever it is. But now, without cash, we're all dependent on some other things. We can be controlled. And now we are certainly moving to a cashless society. Sydney Morning Herald a few years ago, when was it? This was back in 2020, the business appeal of tap and go. You all know. How many of you got cash on you? I won't ask you to put your hand up, but hardly any of us carry cash today, right? Got a card, bit of cash, but not much. In fact, I don't even carry cash myself. ABC, back in COVID-19, what does it say? COVID-19 is speeding up Australia's shift toward a cashless future. Why? Because remember when COVID was here, you don't want to touch anybody, you might get the bug, right? So you don't want to handle cash because if you give me your dollars, I might get you a bug. So tap and go was very, very popular back in COVID-19 because that meant you're not going to pass the bug on so easily. That's what they were talking about. Here's another one. The strongest sign Australia is headed totally toward a cashless society. Here's why. Have you noticed that it's very hard? There's armour guard companies, these companies that pick up the cash, they're getting out of business because there's no cash to pick up much these days. So they're going down the drain, as we say, these sort of companies. And that's what they're saying. Money transporter armour guard is in peril, cash could be dead. Here's another one. How about ATMs? Have you noticed it's very difficult to get ATMs these days? Yeah. Last week I was in Brisbane, the last few weeks, running the series up there, and I went looking for an ATM to get some money so I could put some in the offering. So I was battling to find an ATM. I had to go look for one, usually at the garage and whatever, but because this is why we're going cashless today. We're moving away from cash in our society. Now, let's talk about a controllable currency system. We want to talk about things like Bitcoin and digital currency and this sort of thing, cryptocurrency. I'm sure you've heard of all these sort of fancy words. But notice what our Reserve Bank of Australia says. This is the Sydney Morning Herald. The RBA, our Reserve Bank of Australia, is to trial a digital currency. And we'll see what that means in a moment. Here's another one. A study of 130 countries, that's half the world's population, are exploring what we call central bank digital currencies. We call them CBDCs. Here are all the countries, and many of them are now exploring this idea. What does it mean? It means this. Central bank digital currencies mean these are issued by the state and they're backed by the state, the government, which means basically we're giving governments the control. That's why they've even pointed out that very soon they can shut you down, your bank accounts down, simply because you've spent too much money on such certain sort of items down the track. Simply because you haven't been to the doctor lately, so you get shut down because they can control. Now, I'm not saying this is, I'm simply saying we've got the technology. The whole world is going this way today. That's where we're moving, and that means central control. So that's what this guy says. We can be controlled by others when we have a cashless society and when we have a globalization. Number two is, by the way, and we said the mark of the beast talks about that. Also, when you're all connected economically, like a global village, it means one power can pull down the others. One power can cause everybody else to crash. Is that possible? Well, I'm sure you've heard of GFC. Remember that? Global financial crisis back in 2008. America caught an economic virus with what we call the subprime mortgage crisis. When they sneezed, all the nations around the world got the bug. You remember here in Australia that they gave money to you so that you could keep spending, so we keep the economy going. I remember, I think it was Mr. Rudd at the time, he was giving money to everybody. Same happened everywhere over the world. Other countries did the same. And the Bible mentions there's coming a global economic collapse. Now, what about physical coercion? Is it possible that we can be controlled physically? Well, I don't think that's hard to see that. For example, you've read of Nazism during the Second World War. How did the Nazis control the German people? Physically. Many people lost their lives, were put in concentration camps because of physical coercion. How did communism control people? Physical coercion. Back in those times, people were very afraid of what the state might do. Now, we've even had a good example of physical coercion during COVID, right? Now, please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying governments were doing the wrong thing by trying to give vaccinations to people and keep them the bug away. But people lost their jobs because they wouldn't get vaccinated, right? Back then. People felt they didn't want to get, but they were forced to do it. So all I'm saying is physical coercion of citizens is not something that can't happen. It's been happening all over the world during COVID. All over the world. As I say, I'm not saying it was a bad thing during the bug. I'm just simply saying they can do it. That's the point. Now, here's the question. Is it realistic that Earth's final events, so the end time events, are going to impact the spiritual sphere of life? Is that really possible that people are not going to be able to buy or sell unless they certain worship, spiritual stuff? Well, let me show you. I want to talk to you about Sir Arnold J. Toynbee for a moment. Who's Sir Arnold J. Toynbee? He was a British historian some years ago, University of Oxford and London University. He wrote a mammoth set of books called A Study of History. He looked at 21 world civilizations like the Incas, the Aztecs, the Chinese, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, and he was asking the question, why did those ancient civilizations collapse? Why did they disintegrate. I want you to notice what this man said as he researched. The fundamental conflict is not political, but it's religious, he said, as he looks at across all the civilization. The fundamental conflict is not political, but religious. The line cuts across the inward spiritual world within every living soul today. Whatever label of political citizenship may have been stamped on its body by the accident of birth. Now let's see if that's true. Here are the recent international conflicts on our planet over the last, say, 50 years, okay? Think about them. What about this one? Northern Ireland. Remember the Northern Ireland crisis? Who was it? It was Catholics versus Protestants. That was at the heart of that thing. Here's another one. What about Bosnia and Serbia and Croatia? Remember back in the early 1990s? It was about Muslims against Orthodox Christians and against Catholics. It was a religious thing underneath. Here's another one. Terrorism. Usually it's extremist Muslims, right? Some extremist Muslims like ISIS and so on. But they're not the only extremists. There's been extremist Christians, extremist Hindus, extremists. Usually it's a religious group underneath it, back of it. Here's another one. Kashmir, right up there on the Himalayan mountains there. It's about Muslims versus Hindus. That's what's going on behind the scenes. And then another one, a big one, what about Israel and the Middle East? What's that conflict all about? Well, what we have in that conflict is we have Orthodox Jews, very strict Jews, religious Jews. We have evangelical Christians and we have Muslims. You say evangelical Christians? Some years ago on Australian national television, there was a program called What the World Thinks About America. What does the world think about America? And on that program, the Premier of this state at the time, Bob Carr, was interviewed. Now, Bob Carr was a very well-read Premier of New South Wales. And they said, Mr. Carr, why is it that the United States government supports Israel but doesn't support the Palestinian Arabs? Why? He said, that's easy. He said, that's because of Christians in America, Protestants. They believe Israel is God's people, and so they must be supported with military. And that's what's driving America's foreign Middle East policy even today. You think about it. Who is the current ambassador to Israel just this year put in? He is a Protestant Baptist pastor who's been going to the Middle East for many years and supports Israel, but not the Palestinians. It's the Protestants that are pushing the government to do things in Israel because of their belief, you see. So religious, that's all I'm saying. Religious ideas are behind these things. That's what's driven United States foreign policy. Now, even in America itself, which we're going to see is very significant from the book of Revelation, even in America today, there's a growing move in that country for religion to exert itself. For example, in their Bill of Rights, in their Constitution, this is what it says in their own Constitution. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise. In other words, the government in America, when they started, they said, the government is not going to get involved in your religious beliefs, not going to stop you from worshipping as you want, and not going to make any laws about religion. That's their constitution. But that's changing today in that country. You see, you remember this picture here? When they were protesting and storming their government buildings in Washington back in, 2020? Who was doing this? Most of these were Christians. They were waving Bibles around. They just bashed a few guys almost to death, security guards, but they're waving Bibles around. Something is happening. And the religious sphere, that's what John is telling us. And it's in a big way today. So John said, as we near the end of time, these three powers are going to seek global worship. And there are things happening in our world today, that's what we've just been showing, where many of the things happening today are on a religious level in our world today. So John 2,000 years ago was fairly close to the mark, you can see. Now, as we wrap this up today, why are these predictions here? Why are we going to look at these predictions that are found in this book? Why does God make these predictions? Just so that we can be interested in what's coming? No. There are two great reasons. Number one, why prophecy? Now, you'll have noticed that most predictions coming from people today are about gloom and doom, right? A big tsunami, they said, is going to wash over the Himalayan mountains and flood us all. You might have seen the film. Always gloom and doom, no good news in it. That's not the case with the Bible, but the Bible offers hope. I want you to notice what God said when Jeremiah the prophet was writing and predicting. I know the plans I have for you, says God, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you, not to harm you. Plans to give you what? A hope and a future. So when we go into this next series on Countdown, you're going to discover God's predictions are to give us hope and a future. They're not there to scare us to death. They're there to present hope. They're going to show us what's happening in the world, no question. We're going to see very clearly. But they're there to give hope. And secondly, Jesus put it this way. He said, now I've told you before it comes, so that when it does come to pass, you may what? You may believe. So Jesus made predictions and he said, listen, I tell you down here what's going to happen in many years to come, so that when it happens down there, you'll believe. What do you mean believe? You'll put your trust and you'll be part of the last empire. That's God's purpose for prophecy. It's to help you and I believe. And let me tell you, that happened in my own life. I was just telling somebody at lunchtime how I got interested in sharing these things. I was a university student studying medicine at the WA Uni, and I began to wonder at the age of 19, is there anybody out there? Is there really a God? Or we just got this idea in our heads from our parents or something? Is it real? So I began to look at archaeology, the discoveries of archaeology, and I realised, hey, this book is not fairy tales. It's not making it up. It's true. I mean, the things they found, I talked about in this book long ago. And then I began to study some of the prophecies, some of which we've looked at today, but others which we haven't had time to look at. And I began to realise you cannot predict these things way in advance, way back there, and get it right every time. But somebody's not showing you something. Somebody's guiding you. Somebody's leading. Somebody put this book together who's been around for a long, long time, namely God. So that helped me realise there must be somebody. And so I began to believe, yeah, there's a God. And as I looked at this book, it changed my life. You wouldn't have wanted to know me a few years ago when I was at that time. You cross me, I punch your lights out sort of thing, you know. That's the sort of person I was. You cross me, I'm going to cross you big time. But God's word changes us so that we become better people. It changes our lives.
Come on a journey to lost civilizations. See ancient artifacts and long-lost ancient scrolls.
The strange writing on this clay brick is known as cuneiform. Now, the script was used for
Take the journey of a lifetime and travel to ancient Babylon and the island of Patmos to discover how ancient mysteries reveal the future. A live seminar series. Don't miss any program.